Yo, what's going on, everybody? Hope everybody is doing well. Today we're going to be talking about my Limbo Zaw build, and if you don't already know that you can do some crazy damage with Limbo, then you need to do your research, because Limbo is an absolute beast of a Warframe when you know how to play him right. There's a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people in the Warframe community who think Limbo is a bad Warframe, but as you clearly saw from the intro of this video, you can do some pretty damn insane damage with Limbo when you got the right setup. For this Limbo build, I do got the Wrathful advanced helmet ability over his first ability. 254% melee crit chance is pretty damn nice. The amount of crit chance you get is reflected based on your ability strength. As you can see, 254 ability strength equals 254% melee crit chance. First of all, we gotta talk about the setup when it comes to Limbo. Obviously, feel free to rock whatever mod setup you want, but if you're trying to get a crazy damage buff from your third ability, you do need the augment mod for it called Rift Torrent. And as you can see, Limbo deals 30% extra damage for each enemy affected by the Rift Surge while in the Rift, which is exactly why I recommend having at least some sort of range on Limbo so you can increase the range of the fourth ability. The more enemies you get in the Cataclysm bubble, the more of a damage buff you get from Rift Surge. And as you can see, after my mod setup, I get a 76% damage increase. For the most part, this damage buff is additive, but it can be multiplicative with a few sources. If you paired this with Eclipse or Roar, the damage buff you get from Rift Surge would be multiplicative, but this damage buff is also multiplicative whenever you use the Exodia Contagion Zaw and the Glaive. However, it is specifically multiplicative with the explosions. Regardless, the fact that it's still multiplicative means you could do some crazy damage whenever you have those type of weapons on. Even if you don't have a Zaw build, if you have something like the Glaive or any type of Glaive, I highly recommend it with Limbo and Rift Torrent, because when done right, you can get a crazy damage buff and in return do a lot of damage. As far as my Archon shards go on Limbo, I got 2 yellow Tau Forges that give me extra casting speed. Feel free to run whatever Archon shards you want. The reason I got casting speed on here is because, in my personal opinion, having casting speed on Limbo is really clutch. When you're able to cast your abilities much faster, you don't really have to worry about taking damage from enemies, especially if you instantly activate 4 and then use your 2, or vice versa. You can activate the 2 so it's already ready whenever you activate the 4th ability, especially because when you have stasis active, all projectiles and enemies will just straight up be frozen once they're in the rift. Once you've done that and the Cataclysm bubbles up and the enemies are frozen, that's when you want to activate the 3rd ability so you can get as much damage as possible, because again, the Cataclysm bubble shrinks, and obviously the enemies that are toward the edge of the bubble are gonna be kicked out of the Cataclysm ability once it shrinks down enough. So yeah, using the 3rd ability right after Cataclysm is what gives you that huge damage buff, depending on how many enemies are actually within the 4th ability, which is why you want to use the 3 instantly, and then immediately follow that up with Wrathful Advance, so you can then use your melee weapon to do some pretty crazy damage. When you're just casually going through Steel Path, a build like this is super clutch because the enemies quite literally cannot do anything. Killing all the enemies around you with Limbo is not only easy, but it's pretty damn satisfying. And one thing that makes this setup really good is the augmented arcane, because it increases my ability strength, which is of course going to make the amount of damage I get from Rift Surge go up, and then my Wrathful Advance damage goes up, and then my Exodia Contagion Zaw damage goes up, you know what I mean? And yeah, I'm well aware at the end of the day, not everybody has a crazy, hammer Zaw with a really amazing Riven mod, but at the end of the day, as long as you have a Zaw with Exodia Contagion, it's gonna work just fine. This is the build that I like to run on my Zaw. Blood Rush is super important for even more crit chance, so I can get more damage. I do have Conditioned Overload on here to prime up enemies, but with this build, I don't know if y'all noticed throughout those clips, I didn't do any sort of priming at all. I just activated all my abilities and then swung the Zaw. But the mod can still be useful if you have a good status primer. And at the end of the day, and since I have a hammer, and since this Zaw that I'm using in particular is a hammer Zaw, I can actually give it another damage buff on top of all of this with my operator by having the Magus Agris Arcane. At rank 5, this Arcane gives me plus 300% crit damage for 4 consecutive attacks on heavy blades, and that's after Warframe melee transference. And instead of swapping back normally, you melee to swap back. And once you melee to swap back, you will see the buff at the top right of your screen. And yeah, for a Zaw build, that shit is pretty damn nice when you got a hammer Zaw. And at the end of the day, pairing that with Limbo, Wrathful Advance, and just the way you damage with Limbo in general, you can do some amazing damage. Whenever I first started playing Limbo back in the day, I always wanted to make him good. I said this in my most recent video that I made about Limbo. I always wanted to make a good build with him, but eventually I just gave up because I never did the proper research on how to make a good Limbo build, and I just wanted to focus on other stuff as well. But going back and making a really good build with Limbo has definitely been an amazing choice. Because of this build alone, he's made his way into my top 5 favorite Warframes, because I'm a really big fan of Exodia Contagion Zaws, and this build is just everything I ever wanted it to be with Limbo, to be honest with you. I was always a big fan of Limbo's lore, and considering that I never had a great build when I was playing through the game, it feels super awesome to have an amazing build now that I'm at the end game. And again, for anybody who thought you couldn't do some crazy damage with Limbo, I hope this video showed you otherwise, because yeah, negative damage solo in less than 5 minutes. To be honest, that doesn't even matter. I hit crazy amounts of damage solo instantly. And could you imagine if I had teammates that were giving me a buff too, like a chroma buff or something? Oh my goodness. The potential for Limbo's damage is actually insane, and I'm definitely going to be making more videos with him in the future. Feel free to let me know what you guys think of this build down in the comments, and feel free to let me know what you guys think of Limbo in the comments as well. I know a lot of people don't like actually queuing with another Limbo player, but to be honest with you, I feel like most people who play Limbo are actually considerate of their teammates. Anybody who's just trolling on Limbo is simply just an asshole. And people like that usually just try to make the game worse, so either leave the game and just start something anew, or ignore them and try to work around the Limbo build, because anybody who actually plays Limbo and is not a piece of shit will be considerate of their teammates, you know what I mean? When I was playing with my friends and I ran through some missions with my Nourish helmet build, they told me they didn't even have a problem with the way I was killing things. So I guess it really just depends on the mission type that you're doing. But once again, that's just my opinion. Feel free to let me know what y'all think down in the comments. If you really enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me a lot, and I really do appreciate all the support. Of course, I'm trying to grow the channel with Warframe, so all the likes and subs are most definitely appreciated. And the comments that you guys leave. I really do appreciate all the support, guys. Yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for me. Keep your head up and stay positive. And with all that being said, thanks for watching, and have a good one.